What is up, everybody? Welcome into Shout, a Buffalo football podcast inside Hard Rock Stadium. I'm Matt Parrino, joined by Ryan Talbot for the post-game edition, and a pretty concerning post-game edition indeed, Ryan Talbot. The Bills go down in stunning fashion. I texted you, what was the line going into this game? And the Bills were 9.5-point road favorites against the 2-7 Miami Dolphins. They come in here and get absolutely whooped. 30-13, issues on both sides of the ball. We're going to get into this 4-turnover mess on offense, the tackling nightmare that was for this Bills defense on this episode of Shout. How are you, buddy?
Hey, I'm doing well. Yeah, disastrous performance on both sides of the ball. Same old story with this offense, though, in the passing game, the inability to get open. Defense, injuries are clearly taking its toll, and you know, the depth was tested today and did not fare well.
So let's start on the offensive side of the ball. And I mean, if we're power ranking who deserves the most blame for this performance, I think it's got to start with Joe Brady on a couple of really questionable calls in the first half. You know, maybe Sean McDermott gets a little bit aggressive on that first drive and goes for it on fourth down. And I get that argument. But at the same time, if he doesn't get it there, you're on your own side of the ball. You hand the ball back after your defense just forced a turnover. I don't know if that's necessarily the best spot. I think you got to come out and you got to dial up a better group of plays coming out to get your offense going in a positive direction. But, you know, guys not open, whether it's not scheming them open, the lack of emphasis on, I get the everybody eats mentality, right? I get the mantra. I get that this is an offensive identity. But when Dalton Kincaid finally gets featured in this offense and he goes for 20 yards and 17 yards on back-to-back plays, I just don't understand why there's this inability to get him involved earlier. And now he's dealing with a hamstring injury. He left the game. He didn't return. We don't know how long he's going to be out. This was a very concerning effort for this passing game. And, you know, it comes down to, I believe Carl Jones tweeted out the next gen stat, 3.53 seconds to pass for Josh Allen, the highest of his career. A lot goes into that, right? Like guys not being open, the offense not being and operating in sync. There's a lot of questions that need answers for this passing game.
Yeah, you know, the play that has defined this offense or defined it today was the 3rd and 16 play where Josh Allen ran what felt like 100 yards around the field, back and forth, waiting for someone to get open before finally finding Curtis Samuel for a 21-yard gain. It just speaks to the inability of these receivers to get open, which part of that falls on them. Part of that falls on Joe Brady for his inability to scheme guys open. That's got to be part of your job as the offensive coordinator. You know, you look in New York and Brian Daboll is probably out the door right now. But one thing Daboll could do in Buffalo's OC, didn't matter who it was, he could scheme guys open. He was good at doing that, giving Josh Allen these easy tosses. We're sitting here after a 30-13 loss to the Miami Dolphins. And once again, you have Sean McDermott sitting there post-game saying, I think there were some plays where guys just weren't open. That is worrisome. I mean, that is your job as OC. And stop being so predictable. We saw the 4th down attempt where it looked like the Bills were going to throw. Miami calls the timeout. Miami clearly saw that. They were ready for the short pass to James Cook, so Allen has to throw up a prayer to Jackson Hawes. That is not a recipe for winning when you have Allen and Cook in that situation. This is a Bills team that cannot play from behind. They have shown that time and again this season for the most part. And when that happened today, you saw all of their warts and hiccups on offense.
I don't think Josh Allen is blameless in this performance, and no. I don't want it to make out like that's the case, but I think just from a plan perspective, we've been talking about the concerns about the inability of Joe Brady to be able to counterpunch or to maybe go to other pitches in his bag. Like, they obviously had answers for the Bills' run game, like very early on. And throughout the course of the game, I think James Cook ripped a 14-yard run at one point, and it felt like that was the first time they really got things going. I thought it was interesting. I think that was after they went to jumbo personnel because Dalton Kincaid was out, so they ended up kind of switching some things up a little bit, maybe making an adjustment. You have to do that more when teams are, this isn't even a great defense, Ryan. This is one of the worst defensive statistically against the pass in the NFL, and you had no answers at any level. you look at, I tweeted out the Mac Hollins deep play in the New England game today, and we can get to that later on in the show. And it's like, there's none of that happening in the Bills offense with guys that run 4-3 like Curtis Samuel, guys that run 4-3 like Elijah Moore. Mac Hollins isn't a 4-3 guy. Like, he's winning on the outside based on scheme, whether it becomes Josh McDaniel scheming him open, whether it be the kind of play call, the creativity of putting guys in the right spots and in the route concepts and all the things that go into that. Joe Brady's not getting the job done. And I think what we're seeing happen is when it doesn't go well early in the game, like it didn't today, it's leading to Allen like trying to kind of do something and figure things out. And there was one play early on the first drive where I think it was the third down, where he was waving frantically to Keon Coleman to get into the scramble drill and get open. And he just has an inability at this point in his career to be able to do that, which is, it's concerning. We're sitting here talking about 10 weeks into the season, the idea of maybe Gabe Davis coming in here and having a huge impact off of a torn meniscus last year. He's played football in a year. That is a bad place to be. And I get it. The Bills went out and they tried to trade for a wide receiver this week. They tried to trade for Jalen Waddle. And the Miami Dolphins basically ended up saying, no, we're not going to do it. But you have not a lot of other levers left to pull. And I don't know what the necessary answers are outside of maybe some dramatic changes. Like, this is worse, Ryan, than the Denver Broncos loss a couple of years ago that got Joe Brady or Ken Dorsey fired.
It's up there for sure. And it's as bad, if not worse, than the 9-6 game to Jacksonville, as ugly as that was. Buffalo no-showed in this matchup, Matt. And you mentioned Josh Allen. He had a terrible game. He couldn't step into a throw in the end zone where he had Shavers, he said, open, led to an interception in coverage. Trying to get extra yards on a QB keeper led to a fumble. James Cook with the fumble as well. But, Allen is pressing out there. He is not faultless. He played a big part in today's loss, but you can see how much this is taxing him and how frustrated he is getting. I'm not sure I've seen him so visibly frustrated at so many times this season as I have over the course of his career.
I think that's a great point. I think that every part of it has looked so taxing on Josh Allen. And that's part of the problem with Brandon Beane's offseason approach. And not only his offseason approach, but you have to be able to see down the line a couple of years when you're making franchise-altering decisions. I thought that the move to go out and get Stephon Diggs was one of those, where he saw something that wasn't working, he pivoted, and it paid great dividends for this offense. Well, now you've turned into this great rushing offense. What was the natural next pivot to try to throw teams off? The fact that the Miami Dolphins come in here at 2-7 and have this kind of game plan for the Bills' offensive attack, that is troubling. Like, for Bills fans that are panicking right now and hitting the panic button about like what this could mean for their ability to get back to a Super Bowl contending team down the stretch, I think those are warranted concerns. And you see the frustration, you see the lack of answers. I don't think Keon Coleman is just going to be able to all of a sudden turn himself into a separator, somebody that's able to provide options for Josh Allen. And the fact that there's not enough wide receivers getting open tends to point the spotlight on Joe Brady. And the outside noise is only going to get louder as we go on here. And it's not getting any easier. You're going to get a pissed off Buccaneers team in Orchard Park next week, coming off of a loss to the Patriots. It's going to be a tough game. Then you go on the road to the Houston Texans, who, I know they got beat up today. They're going to get CJ Stroud back. Like, there are some tough games. And now you're sitting here 1.5 games back of the New England Patriots. It's a bad spot to be in.
Terrible spot to be in. And the Texans, to their credit, came back and won that game against Jacksonville. Unbelievable defense. Davis Mills making some big plays. It all goes back to the fact that Miami did not respect Buffalo's passing game. They said, we're going to stop James Cook and we're going to make life difficult. And they did that. And you mentioned Gabe Davis earlier. Davis is not going to be most likely the savior. There's no Christmas present under the tree here waiting for the Bills. But you know where there is a little Christmas present, Matt? Top Supermarket. The old Christmas bonus is waiting for you, Bills Mafia. Go treat yourself tomorrow morning to a Tops breakfast pizza and check out the Christmas bonus. Hop aboard the Savings Express, as it is the season to save on groceries and all of your holiday gifts. Christmas bonus is underway at Tops Friendly Market. Shop at Tops. Save $10 in all your other favorite stores and restaurants with over 20 different gift cards to choose from. Go to Tops tomorrow. A little Monday blues trip after a bad Bills loss.
Man, that transition was superb. I know it's a Bills loss post game edition, but that was fire. All right, offensively, a couple of other things here. I think what we also have seen on both sides of the ball are the dramatic impacts of some of the injured losses to, Josh Palmer, to me, on offense, they need him back in a bad way. It looks completely different with him not being able to be out there. And I would almost go as far as saying, like, in spots like today, when you're not able to get things going, having Palmer out there with maybe like an Elijah Moore and Shakir might open up the field a little bit more. You have Dalton Kincaid, who's now banged up. We don't know what that's going to look like long term. Ryan, I have been banging this drum for weeks as Bills fans have been flooding my DMs and my mentions with AJ Epinesa tossed into trade ideas. He is an important piece to this team, especially when it comes to run defense. You felt his absence out there just in terms of being able to set the edge. Obviously it's bad news that Landon Jackson goes out there and goes out of the game after just 2 snaps. You feel awful for him, but the Bills felt that loss. And now you're sitting here as banged up as the Bills are on both sides of the ball. Christian Benford missed this game. You hope you can maybe get TJ Sanders back in the next couple of games. They got to get healthy. They got to get healthy quick with some of the games that are coming up on their schedule.
And we won't ever know this for sure, but it almost felt like the Bills maybe kept a few guys out and erred on the side of caution. Let's give them another week to get ready, because when you look at that, they had Christian Benford as questionable. They had Palmer as questionable. And I get it in the case of Benford. It happened on Wednesday. He doesn't practice at all Thursday. He's limited on Friday. But maybe the Bills kind of just overlooked this game, thinking they could get away with giving those guys just one extra week. And it came back to bite them because, Epinesa, they had to keep him out. He didn't clear the concussion protocol, obviously. But you lose Landon Jackson in the game. You're playing Daquan Jones at defensive end at times in this matchup. That's a recipe for losing right there. On the back end of it, at one point, Trey White has to exit the game. He's able to get back in, but you have Dane Jackson in there. And the first touchdown of the game, you saw Tua pick on Dane Jackson. He threw it between Dane Jackson and Jordan Poyer for an easy score. So these depth options, when they were called in, did not step up for the most part today. Minus Cam Lewis, shout out to him, one of the only bright spots on the defensive side of the ball. He had a great game overall, but a lot of these guys with that next man up opportunity did not fare well today. And the depth has really taken its, toll on the Bills this year.
One last quick thing on the offense before we move to the other side of the ball. The Keon Coleman conversation is one that it's complex. I mean, he goes out and he has that one play for 35 yards. Josh Allen's questioned about Keon after the game, and he says, well, we hit on that one, so no
after
concern
a long
there.
pause.
After a long pause, like trying to figure out how to answer the question. It's like he was almost invisible the rest of the game. And so if you're the Bills and how you handle this situation, I think first and foremost, you need Palmer back in the mix, because with him out there as wide receiver 1, I mean, Palmer's your wide receiver 1 at this point, which is, a tough spot to be in. But in terms of Coleman just not being able to get open and the limited nature into which he can be used as a player, the Bills are hamstrung into what they can do. I feel like they're so limited at the second level. You very rarely see them outside of the Dalton Kincaid crossers that worked in this game. Where are the wide receiver plays at that level? Like Elijah Moore hit on one last week. Nothing in this game. Almost zero for Curtis Samuel outside of that out of structure play that he made. Keon Coleman is going to have to be, you're going to have some hard conversations inside the building about what Keon Coleman is, what his future is, and how you can best position him to start to maybe make some plays in this offense. It wasn't good for him for 90% in this game today.
And this also goes back to the draft, where at least we've been told that it was Josh Allen really pushing for Keon Coleman to be that receiver pick for the Bills. That's why if you're the GM, you don't let your quarterbacks maybe make those calls in those moments. And I'm not trying to really crush Coleman, but it's just not working out here. And maybe it is Brady and his inability to scheme him open, but we've seen some 50-50 balls that have not gone his way. He had a nice touchdown catch today once he found an advantageous matchup and wasn't lined up against someone that was the same size as him. But it's just been too hit and miss for Keon Coleman in this offense. And, you mentioned Kincaid a minute ago. Kincaid has been great when he's on the field, but here's another problem with this passing attack. He has been Allen's favorite weapon this year, but can you count on him when it matters? This is another injury. He seems to be banged up a lot, missing time, and on an offense that is already struggling so much to find consistency, I don't know if he's going to be someone that you can count on in these pivotal moments, whether it's late in the regular season when they're fighting for playoff seeding or come playoff time.
I want to get to the defense here, but like overarching reactionary stuff to this loss, like it's been a weird couple of weeks in the NFL. Like the Packers just lost to the Panthers inexplicably. I mean, that's a lot of people's Super Bowl pick. Like it is a weird year in that the Chiefs are 5-4, still the betting favorite to win their division. Obviously, their schedule gets a little bit easier. I'm not necessarily saying that this season is a lost cause. I do think that the Bills will figure out a way to bounce back from this, figure out some of the things. They've been here before. I mean, in some of the most like brutal developments in season over the last couple of years. But it is it feels a little bit different in the sense that 3 or 4 different people that we talked to in the building or in the locker room said they felt like the Dolphins wanted this game more. I can't wrap my mind around that. How could a 2-7 team want to win a game more when you're chasing the New England Patriots? You have everything to gain by coming in here and just pounding the Dolphins. I think that says a lot about the state of the locker room, the state of the team. You have to wonder about the messaging of the head coach. You have to wonder about just the approach of the general manager. And these are both people that I've defended quite a bit. And I probably will still continue to defend them. We'll see how they respond over the next couple of days. But this is a inflection point of this season for this Bills team on both sides of the ball. And there are going to have to be some hard conversations over the next couple of days.
Yeah, you usually see that emotional pick-me-up when a team fires their head coach for a game. Not generally when they fire their general manager. And they didn't make a ton of moves at the deadline. They moved on from one pass rusher. So it's not like they tore this thing down. But to come out there and perform the way that they did look like the team that wanted it more. And to hear people say that, it's pretty damning for the Bills, in my opinion, because you're right. This is not a Bills team that can cruise to first place in the AFC East. They were in second entering this game in the division. Now they're even further behind following their loss and New England's win against Tampa Bay. So this is not just a team that was on cruise control. They needed this win, and now they've dug themselves a hole. It's still possible for them to come back and win this division. There's no doubt about that. But if they continue to play like this, we're going to be sitting there saying that this just might be another wasted year in Josh Allen's career.
All right, defensively, it starts off with the interception by Cole Bishop, and everything worked on that play. You got pressure on Tua. He put up an air ball, moon ball. Bishop read it, gets back, he makes the play. The offense goes 3 and out, and then it's almost like the settling nature of knowing they're going to be able to run the ball. Like, this is a huge problem for the Bills defense. And I know that they were missing a couple of key pieces. Daquan Jones comes back. You got to wonder if he was even 100% yet. But there was real issues in this game. And, Joey Bosa's playing out there with a club. The thing that we talked about hard conversation on the offense. What are the Bills going to do at linebacker, Ryan? Like Terrell Bernard.
It was bad.
It's bad right now. And Matt Milano, who at times has looked like the old version of Matt Milano, wasn't out there at all today. I mean, this was the worst game that I can remember Matt Milano playing. Both of those guys, very quick to be out of the locker room after the game. Neither of them spoke to the media. Matt Milano never does. Terrell Bernard's the captain. I mean, that was an extension that the Bills got done this year. It's not a monster extension. As a matter of fact, the dead cap hit to move on even after the season, it's not astronomical. It's not crazy. So I think that was done in a way that gives you the opportunity to maybe reassess that thing. But right now, the fact that 30-plus-year-old Shaq Thompson, you're just counting the seconds until he's back and available in the lineup. It didn't help to not have Christian Benford. I mean, Tre'Davious White as a tackler today, a lot left to be desired. I think it's going to end up being somewhere around 15 missed tackles in this one. The second and third level against the run today, the Miami Dolphins knew it. They knew they can run the ball on them all day long, and the Bills weren't really able to stop them.
No, they were getting pushed around, linebackers, cornerbacks, you name it, on a lot of those run plays. For the most part, there was a few plays. Trey White came in with a really nice run stop in the second half of the game. But the linebackers are my biggest concern on this defense. If we're not talking about injuries and depth in that area, because defensive end obviously is an issue too right now. But Terrell Bernard has not looked good at all this season. And it's, baffling because he's had so many good moments in this system, in this scheme. He just has looked like he's just been thrown around all year. He hasn't been able to shed blocks. It's by far looking like the worst of the extensions that the Bills gave out this offseason. And that's saying something because there's been a few where they have not performed very well. And you mentioned it. The fact that we're sitting here waiting for Shaq Thompson, a player that before this year missed significant time the previous 2 years in Carolina, and I didn't even know how much he could be counted on this year. The fact that we're counting on him to kind of save that linebacker room says something, and it might be time to give Dorian Williams a big opportunity. Give him a few games running out there with the ones and the bulk of the snaps, see what he can do, because it's just not working right now with some guys that in the past have really stepped up for Buffalo in Bernard and Milano.
And, I think even on the, the plays where they went to their, dime look, they probably could have done it a little bit more. Jalen Waddle had himself a game, which it's kind of comical that, the storyline going into this game was obviously the Bills reaching out to the Dolphins and them turning them away. I think the report is a 2027 first round pick and a 2026 third round pick. And the Dolphins said no to the Bills on Jalen Waddle. And you saw in this game the kind of juice that he gives you on the outside, no matter if the Bills are playing zone or man. And I know Maxwell Harrison's a rookie and he's going to have some learning moments. He had the interception at one point, got beat a little bit on the Jalen Waddle touchdown. That's going to happen. We didn't get to the defense, Ryan, in this episode until almost 20 minutes in for a reason. I don't even think that's the biggest storyline coming out of this game. But I do think this perpetual inability to stop the run for this team that knows it's been its bugaboo for the last couple of years, and I know not against the Chiefs in the playoffs, but having an ability to at least be more formidable and not being able to find it, it's concerning.
Yeah, very much so. And, you look across the board here and they got out into a hole early. I will say this. The defense did kind of stabilize at one point, gave the Bills enough of a chance to get back into the game. They score, can't get the 2-point conversion. They had the Bills done that. You're talking about a one-possession game at that point. It was really some garbage time runs late in the game where, don't get me wrong, the Bills are trying to stop Miami. But that's where two of those scores came from very late. The defense did enough. It was the offense that really just could not get going today. The defense has a lot to improve. There's no denying that. You mentioned Harrison, the touchdown reception he gave up. He just let Waddle blow right by him. And even with that speed that he has, he couldn't get back in time to make a play on the ball. He was obviously grabbing it. Waddle got penalized for pass interference on the play. He did rebound later in the game with an interception. So there's going to be those highs and lows. I really thought that Bishop, he played pretty well for the most part. Cam Lewis, those are the only two guys, though, that I can sit there and pinpoint. And, I'll give Bosa a star as well for playing with a freaking club on his hand. That could not have been easy to do. So when he missed a tackle, I don't want to sit there and say it's understandable, but it is. You're playing with one hand, essentially, and they need you to play with one hand based on how bad the depth is.
I also think that we saw today against an immobile Tua Tagovailoa, only hitting him twice, no sacks in this game. The loss of Michael Hoyt can't be overstated, Ryan. Like, they beat the heck out of Patrick Mahomes last week. And I think Hoyt's presence and ability, not having Epinesa this week, hurt as well. I mean, to lose those two guys, that's going to be something that you struggle with. But how they replace him moving forward, the fact that they were maybe even in on Quinnen Williams tells you they're a little bit concerned about their depth on the defensive line. And it puts TJ Sanders under a microscope. When he gets back and he's able to play, they're going to need him to find a way to make an impact, because I don't know if they're necessarily going to be able to rely on a Javon Solomon, who, I got to be honest with you, I'm going to have to go back and watch this game. I don't remember a single play in this game that he made.
Yeah, I want to say there was one. He may have batted a pass. I can't remember now off the top of my head. I remember his name getting mentioned one time for a decent play in this game. But you're right. For the most part, disappearing act. And if I'm the Bills, maybe I am getting desperate. Maybe I'm calling Christian Wilkins and his agent saying, how's that recovery coming along? Is he healthy? Because the Bills need some help there on their defensive line. Maybe I'm calling Asante Samuel Jr.'s agent, trying to get on that list of visits and workouts to see what he looks like, because I don't ever want to see Dane Jackson thrown into another game again this season. Whatever's out there, the Bills need to scour it. They need to see it. I don't know what realistically is out there at wide receiver. I saw someone in my comments during the game saying Odell Beckham Jr. I don't think there's anything left in that tank, but
no, thanks.
Whatever. Kick the tires on whatever you can for a workout, at least. See what's available. There are some major issues on both sides of the ball.
I was texting with a scout this week about Christian Wilkins, because that's been kind of like a very underreported story. And like, what's the deal out there with Wilkins? A lot of Bills fans have asked about whether or not that could be a potential guy that the Bills go after. You mentioned it. The injury is something that I think you're getting a guy coming off of not one, but I think 2 surgeries. So that's going to have to get all figured out. And then it's about teams doing the due diligence on how that thing ended in Las Vegas and why the Raiders moved on from him. There were some weird reports out there, but from a talent perspective and what he could potentially add as a player, you talk about like run defense. Yeah, throw Christian Wilkins into the mix if it makes sense, because the Bills have some holes to fill. I thought it was ironic in a way that before the game, Ed Oliver posted on Instagram. I think he posted a photo of himself tackling a quarterback and said counting the minutes or counting the seconds or something like that. I don't know if he's necessarily in the plans anytime soon, but obviously wants to get back at some point in the playoffs. It's not going to be a very long playoff run if they can't figure out a way. You think about teams that they're going to go up against in the playoffs. If Baltimore can get back to first place in that division, the Indianapolis Colts and Jonathan Taylor, you're not going to be able to get to the Super Bowl if you can't defend the run. And right now, this team can't do it.
No, and the Colts, for as bad as Daniel Jones has looked the last 2 weeks, they can run the ball very, very well with Jonathan Taylor, and that would pose some problems. Pittsburgh doesn't have the same rushing attack, obviously, but they've been pretty competent on offense, and the defense showed some signs of life last week. Baltimore, you mentioned. The AFC West, Denver, I know Bo Nix isn't having the best season, but they can move the ball, and their defense is really good. Same with the Chargers in terms of winning games. There's a lot of tough outs in the playoffs this year, and the Bills might find themselves with an early exit if they can't find some answers real quick.
All right, we'll get so much more to you this week coming up. We'll have a bunch of episodes. We'll recalibrate. You're going to want to check out the Tuesday episode of Shout when we collab with Josh Reed and Carl Jones. One thing I'm looking forward to tomorrow at 4:00, Ryan, is talking to Joe Brady. Remember, he said, I think it was 2 weeks ago, that he had no concerns about the passing game. And the Bills didn't need the passing game to win that week, and they've been able to pass the ball. Well, they needed the passing game this week, and it didn't work out very well. So it'll be interesting to hear from him tomorrow.
Yeah, he needs to feel a little bit of heat after that performance. Could ask that question again. Why isn't he scheming guys open? He's taken a lot of blame for Coleman and his lack of contributions this year. But you can only take the blame so often. You got to come up with some answers here sooner or later.
All right, that'll do it from Hard Rock Stadium. I'm Matt Parrino. He's Ryan Talbot. We'll see you soon, everybody. Take care. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.